Hello Kitty, me gusta mi iris, me gusta mi booty. Hoy me tomo selfie con filtro Hello Kitty.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Dangerous Games Podcast. We're super excited to have you here. This is going to be a crazy episode. I am joined today by my gorgeous, stunning, perfect, wonderful, most glorious person in the world, co-host, the original Mrs. Breaker, Sarah.
Hey.
How are you? You having a good show? Oh, it just
Whoa.
went dark. Did your power
Okay.
go off?
Did my power go
We're
off?
going,
You act like no,
"Woo."
it's just I was trying to make
you
it,
live in Montana, so I don't even know what goes on out there.
it was just a bear. Just pulled the plug. Okay?
It's a cocaine bear.
Yeah. We're doing good over here. Just cruising.
All right.
Cruising
Well,
along.
I'm glad to hear that. I am Courtney. I'm with Reckless Cards, and today's episode is going to be my episode. So I'm just gonna dive right in because I have a lot. It's a lot. So I feel like we've done a lot of missing people or people who just disappeared. And this one is another one of those. And again, unsolved. We don't know what happened to this man. So today's episode is the heavyweight champion of the of the ABA, the heavyweight champion of the ABA, John Brisker. He is a Detroit. He's a Detroit native, so he is from my neck of the woods. There is a park named or a playground named after him in Hamtramck. So it's, this one hits a little close to home.
Yeah.
And I thought I would do this one for you because this guy lived a crazy life and he was kind of a character. So we'll get into it. John Brisker's entire life feels like a footnote. He was a professional basketball player who mysteriously disappeared, and his wiki page is barely a page long. Like literally, there's nothing on it.
That's how mine is too. That's just crazy.
I had to do so much digging to find stuff about him.
Same C's.
The crazy stories about what may have happened to him, though, that could be a book. There's so much. Once you start digging, there's so much. John was born June 15th, 1947, and he grew up in Hamtramck. He was raised in the projects of Detroit. His mother, Ernestine Brisker, was a steadfast presence in his and his two siblings' lives. He was the middle child. John was the second born, and unfortunately for the family, Ernestine was partially paralyzed due to a stroke. And after the stroke, when John was 5, his father left. He didn't want to deal with it. There were no easy times for the Brisker family. Ernestine was a small, devout woman who did everything she could to support her children, despite her disabilities. However, as the kids grew, they recognized that they were going to need to pitch in. From the young age of 11 years old, John would take jobs working 8 hours a day to help support his family. So he would go to school and then he would work 8 hours, and then he did that every day.
Crazy.
At 11 years old. So this is like late 50s, early 60s now. He caught pneumonia at a car wash before he switched to janitor work until he turned 18. He would work for dozens of companies, lying about his age until he got caught, and then moving on to another building and getting another job. John was a big guy. He ended up being about 6 feet 5 inches tall. He was very muscular.
So you probably could get away with saying that he was older.
People believed him.
Yeah,
people believed him. Even as a child of 11, people believed he was old enough to hold down an 8-hour a day job for a while. But you're still 11, so at some point.
And you said he was the youngest of 11?
Middle. He was the middle, yeah.
Wow, that's still crazy.
It is. So with his mother in and out of the hospital and their dire living conditions, the state had tried to take the children away from Ernestine. So they came in and they're like, "You're not taking care of these kids, and we're going to take them." But she battled her way out of the hospital and kept custody of her kids.
Wow.
John never pulled punches on the court or off of it. And when he spoke about his childhood, he did so with a frankness that may make some people pretty uncomfortable. In one well-known quote about his childhood, he said, "I feel like I missed part of my childhood. I lied about my age, but I had to keep switching jobs because they'd find out. They'd try to take us away from my mother one time, but she got out of the hospital and she struggled. I look at her now and think how easy it would have been for her to just quit, give up. But all three of us went to college."
Wow.
So I actually like when I was doing research for this, I listened to another podcast and they talked about this quote, like this specific quote, because it's a pretty
Yeah.
famous quote of his, and they made fun of him. They were like,
What?
"How could his mom
That
just
is
give up? What does that even mean?"
that
But
is so powerful
it
in
was
so many ways.
it was their privilege. It was that kind of I turned that podcast off. I actually didn't even finish it. John acknowledges mom could have just turned the kids over to the state and had herself only to worry about. Like she could have been like, "Here,
Yeah,
them,"
easily.
and she didn't. She did everything she could. The kids helped out. They were a family and
Yeah.
they looked out for each other. And so for like a podcast to like make fun of that, I was really disappointed and disgusted.
And I can't even say, like, because 'cause we're females, like, maybe we're taking it a little bit more on, like, the, sensitive side, because, that's just a lot of people think that sometimes. I just think that that's just as a normal person, that's just horrible to think and say, because that woman did everything she could when she was left with everything on her shoulders after,
So
surviving a
every like
stroke.
thing I read about his mom was that she was like she would do all sorts any odd job she could find. She
She
mended and
tried.
sewed clothes. She did everything she could do. She
Yeah,
was and
she showed
he
up.
was close to her forever. Like
Mm,
when he disappeared and then she passed away, everyone's like cuz there's so many conspiracies about what happened with him. People
mhm,
were like when his mom died if he was still around, he would have come
yeah,
back. 'Cause he loved her. She knew what would happen to her 3 black children in state care in the 1960s, and she fought to keep her
mm,
family together. That fight was in John too. He eventually became known as the heavyweight champion of the ABA.
the world.
So, yeah. Well, no, he wasn't a fight
I
he played basketball, but he fought everyone.
But all I can think of is that song every time you say that.
I know.
So,
Heavyweight champion.
of the world.
Uh So let's back up a little though, because
Okay.
we're ahead of ourselves. John was a hard worker. He worked to support his family while attending high school in Detroit. Brisker averaged 24 points and 20 rebounds as a senior and was named the Detroit Free Press's all suburban to the all suburban squad.
That's crazy.
Rudy Tornov I always say this guy's name wrong, which is terrible because he's like Slavic and I should be able to say this, but Tom Janovich.
Sounds good.
He he's a very famous basketball player. Was on his team in high school and they played against future pros such as Daniels Haywood, Ralph Simpson, Eddie Miles, and Ray Scott on dusty and dilapidated Detroit playgrounds. Like these guys were all they all ended up being pros. Hayward, their names.
Yeah,
They played together in Detroit.
that's crazy.
And these are all like basketball players back in the 60s that played for the ABA. They ended up in the NBA, some of them. So he passed, Brisker was really good. And he was enthusiastically recruited by many colleges. They wanted
Mhm.
him. He was big, he was strong, he
Yeah.
was fast, he was good, he balled. He passed up Michigan State to go play in Toledo, which he regretted.
Oh, okay.
He regretted that, but when they asked him why he chose that, he said, "Toledo made me the best offer. Car, apartment,
Money, probably.
wardrobe." Man, I asked, "Where do I sign?" I didn't care what the school it was, but when I got there, I saw people against me because of my color. I hadn't experienced
Oh,
prejudice before, and I started asking questions. I didn't get any answers. I changed then. I got hostile. I want to know why I couldn't live in this world too. I'm still asking. So growing up in Detroit, where he grew up,
yeah.
it was
Predominantly black?
it was poor.
Really?
It was poor.
Oh,
Everybody was poor. And
mm,
yes, it was Detroit is like the blackest city in the country, so it is
right.
predominantly black, but the white kids and the black kids and all the kids of different races, they were
Gotcha,
all poor. So it wasn't a
gotcha.
race issue, it was a class issue, and they didn't ever, like, feel
Wow.
segregated or different. They were all having the same struggles. When you get to the point of, like, that kind of poverty,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what
What
your
color
race
you
is.
are. I,
Everybody's
totally
kinda
agree.
struggling the same
Yep.
fight, you know?
So,
So
he went to Toledo, and it was like a slap in the face
it
because 'cause
he wasn't used to the race issues
no.
and the tensions, and it was the 60s, 70s.
Yep.
It was rough. So he really
That's
he had to
horrible.
face that, and it was he got a really big chip on his shoulder because of it, and he never let that go, which I don't blame him having to,
Yeah.
to deal with that. That was terrible, and what he went through in Toledo was pretty awful.
Mm.
So a kid from the project in Detroit getting an offer like that seemed like a lifeline, but it ended up being an awful experience for Brisker. His sophomore year, Toledo was 20-1 and ranked number 10 nationally, but soon racial tension would create a rift amongst the team. Several Black players would be suspended, including Brisker. After being suspended from the basketball team, John played football and the tuba. He fancied himself an artist. He was very musically inclined. He loved art. He loved all of that. He was very, for like such a rough guy and like his violent, he was very like soft and gentle when it came to music and arts. It was, he was a
Both
dichotomy.
sides.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So, his basketball coach was not pleased with his choice to play football, but ultimately John's brutality earned him offers from 3 NFL teams. So not only was he fantastic at basketball, but he was really, really good at football too.
Wow.
John struggled with his grades and became ineligible to play basketball. He eventually was failing and he got kicked out. So Brisker spoke about the racial tension on the team as if it were a physically palatable thing. He said it made his hair fall out and gave him ulcers. Like, it was so terrible.
So much stress.
So he left. After leaving Toledo, Brisker worked for several months before playing that summer in Philadelphia's Baker League. This was like a really famous league. It drew a lot of attention. He was really good, and it didn't take long for pro clubs to notice him. Soon he was picked up by the Pittsburgh Pipers and then the Condors, which
I've heard of the Condors.
Yeah, the Condors were like, I knew the Condors. I never heard of the Pipers.
I've never heard of them either.
Brisker got 42 points on his first start.
Jeez.
Yes. So he played for the ABA for 3 years, and then he followed his buddy Hayward, who we talked about earlier, to Seattle, and he played for he played for the Sonics. He scored 47 points in a single game with the Sonics.
That's so crazy.
I know, he's so good. So
Oh my
he ended
goodness.
up playing in the NBA for 3 years. He averaged 20.7 points per game over the course of his ABA NBA career. 26.1 per game in the ABA and 11.9 per in the NBA. But the NBA one, I think his point numbers were really skewed because towards the end of his career, he butted heads really bad with his coach, Bill Russell, and we'll go into that in a minute, but he barely
Bill
played.
freaking Russell.
Bill
Oh my
freaking Russell.
goodness.
Yes. So you're gonna see. So they hated each other, and Bill benched him, and I think that totally skewed
everything.
So, people compare him to LeBron James. Like now, like sports writers and commentators, when they talk about him, they said he was LeBron with more skills. Like he was more skilled physically, size-wise, just brutality. But he was way too angry. His anger and his inability to control his emotions were what was really the downfall of him. Unfortunately for Brisker, his coach and president Bill Russell was not a fan of his. He didn't like his aggressive and explosive personality and like his playing style. He didn't think Brisker was a team player. So they did not get along. He may have been right about that, though, because Brisker wasn't really a team player. But his team loved him. Not all of his team, but for the most part, the people who play with him, they loved him. Some of John's antics, though, were really horrible. Teams back then weren't structured to handle the type of on and off the court issues that came with Brisker. Stories about Brisker were legendary. One goes on that he ran onto the court during practice waving a gun.
What?
Like he just ran out onto the court with a gun. People thought he was known to carry a gun in his his bag, like his little, the little bag.
Is that because of Toledo?
No, they weren't in Toledo. They were in Seattle.
No, but like the torment that he went through.
Maybe he was traumatized from that, so he carried a gun with him. But Utah hosted a John Brisker intimidation night and had professional boxers on the bench on November 4th, 1971. The Condors visit. So this is so some of these antics are from when he was in the ABA and some are from the NBA. So I'm just going to tell. There was like a list. There's so much. So this was when he was playing for the Condors, visited Salt Lake City, and the Stars management arranged a John Brisker intimidation night. Richie explained that it was like the night in the night's game program, which featured pro boxer Ron Lyle, and not that everyone in the Utah Stars team feared John Brisker. Like they were like, "Oh, we're not scared of him. We're not scared of him, but we're gonna do this insane thing."
Let's just call it a
Where
big night.
they they made the whole night about this. They brought in like a bunch of husky, sometimes ill-tempered boxers. Oh no, they wanted to. They called him husky and ill-tempered. They called Brisker husky and ill-tempered. And if he gets out of hand tonight, Stars management has taken steps to keep all of that in control. Surrounding the court tonight will be 5 of the top boxers in the Intermountain area has ever produced. For tonight is John Brisker Intimidation Night, and it is the intention of the Stars to turn the tables on the high-scoring Condor. Tonight it is Brisker who is on foreign soil, and with the likes of Ron Lyle, Bill Daniels, professional boxers from Denver, Don and Gene Fullerman, Rex Lane, and Tony Doyle standing in the wing, that he doesn't get far out of line. So they brought in, for this one guy, they brought in like 7 professional fighters to sit around the edges of the court to keep him in line.
That is so funny. I'm sorry.
Apparently it worked. He didn't get too crazy that night, but what? Like the thought of like like nowadays, if they brought in like 8 guys because John Morant was coming to, Chicago, I'd be like, what is happening?
I'd be like, peace out. I'll watch it at home. Thanks.
Yeah. So
That's
Tom
so
Niasalk, a former ABA and Sonics coach, put a $500 bounty on Brisker before a game. He's like, I will give you guys $500 and for whoever takes him out. And then he got absolutely pummeled during that game. Brisker was arrested in 1971 after a fight outside of the Three Rivers Stadium in Pittsburgh. He had attended the World Series, and he left early and fought with several police officers over a cab. Like 2 of the officers went to the hospital. They were hospitalized after this brawl with him because somebody called a cab and Brisker took the cab. And the police were like, this is somebody else's cab. And he's like, oh, it's my cab now. And so they got in a physical altercation. The police beat his hand so badly. He had to get medical treatment for his hands. But he sent 2 of those cops to the hospital. Yeah. And he got arrested.
I feel like he's a ticking time bomb.
He is. He is. He was super volatile. So in September of 1973, just 4 days into training camp, this is crazy. Brisker and 6'8" forward Joby Wright were pushing and shoving near the basket. There were various versions of what happened. Like everybody had a different kind of story about like what went down, but ultimately, one person said that Wright threw the first punch. Another person said that
she said
Brisker started it. From like what most people say about him is that he very rarely would start a fight, but the second anyone looked at him sideways or if they came at him, he was going to finish the fight, basically.
Sounds like me.
Yes, but everybody agreed what the end result is that Brisker broke Wright's jaw. He punched him in the face, broke his jaw, and knocked out 4 of his teeth during practice.
Oh my God.
Yes. So Watts, team manager Watts said he hit the ground like a bag of potatoes. Brisker walked off. Ain't nobody said shit. The gym was like a funeral. Ambulance came. Russell told everyone to go home. His teeth fell on the floor, Hayward says. I was like, oh shit. Russell said, all right, we have to tone John down. They actually introduced him to Jim Brown, the football player Jim Brown.
Yeah.
To like mentor him, and they like got along really great. They were like really good buddies. They'd play checkers and stuff together. It didn't really tone him down, but they did become really good friends after this incident. I thought that was an interesting little thing. I didn't write it down, but I did read that. So
that's so cool.
Yeah, so he punched the guy in the face. His teeth fell. Everyone was like, "Oh my god!" And then that was it. The practice was over, and then they made him be friends with Jim Brown.
That sounds really like you go from one extreme to the other real quick.
It's so wild, right?
Yeah.
So several players thought Brisker would carry a gun in a bag and would eventually kill an opponent. They're like, if he killed someone, I wouldn't be shocked by it. Needless to say, everyone was pretty afraid of John. With Russell being both his coach and the president, when he decided he was done with John's antics, he demoted him to the Eastern League. It was like really a big deal. He was like, "You're not playing anymore." He sent him off. In true John fashion, though, he came out his first night at the Eastern League and he scored 51 points.
Of course he did, because he's not supposed to be there. His attitude just sucks.
He did, and his coach at the Eastern League was like, I couldn't, like, Russell wasn't impressed. He's like, whatever, he should be able to do that. He should be playing professional ball, and he's playing against, basically minor leaguers, because he should go out there and do that. I'm not impressed. But his coach was like, he played like every game was his last game.
Because he's probably one punch away from it being his last
I know,
game.
he's so...
I mean, jeez.
And by 1974, Brisker was barely playing. He was mostly riding the bench. In 1975, Brisker was basically finished. I think he ended up getting bought out. Like, they bought out his contract because he wasn't playing and he had a really hefty contract. It was expensive. So they tried to buy him out for 50 cents on the dollar. I couldn't find anywhere what the actual buyout ended up being, but they did. They just they paid off like whatever, settled his contract, and they were like, peace.
Man, I wish you could find that.
I know.
That would be so interesting.
I know. I looked everywhere.
Really?
Yeah. I know that he was in some financial trouble. He opened a club. Because he loved music.
Right.
And he was like $40,000 like in the 70s. That's a lot of money in the arrears for like taxes and stuff.
Yeah, that is.
So Brisker always considered himself an artist and lover of music. He owned a club. He was failing to pay his bills there. So in 1975, Brisker took his first trip to Africa. He was looking for a new business venture, according to what he was telling people. In Africa, yep. That's what he was telling people. He also told his teammate Hayward that he was going back to his roots. So Hayward would also say that Brisker seemed out of sorts and angry, which that doesn't, like, him saying that he seemed angry seems like intense because he always seemed angry. Right. But him and Hayward got along. They were friends since they were in high school. Hayward, he tried to talk Brisker out of going back to Africa, going as far as trying to like steal his passport from him and everything. Hayward says he thought Brisker was getting involved in some dark and shady places. He thinks Brisker showed him a picture of himself, of Brisker, with Ugandan dictator Idi Amin. But he wasn't 100% sure about this. And this is kind of like the catalyst for all of the, like, what happened to John Brisker stuff.
The kind of conspiracy, the kind of just...
Yes. Yeah. Because either way, Brisker didn't like Hayward's intrusion and he left. And he never saw him again. Idi Amin was an Ugandan military officer and politician who served as the third president of Uganda from 71 to 79. He ruled as a military dictator and is considered one of the most brutal despots in modern world history. Amin's rule was characterized by rampant human rights abuses, including political repression, ethnic persecution, extrajudicial killings, as well as nepotism, corruption, and gross economic mismanagement. International observers and other human rights groups estimated that between 100,000 and 500,000 people were killed under his regimen. This guy was a monster. And so if Brisker was taking pictures with him,
right,
people were freaking out, okay?
Yeah.
After that visit, Hayward never saw John again. Neither did anyone else. His brother Ralph told the press that Brisker had visited Nigeria, not Uganda.
Okay.
And had purchased property in Nigeria. So this is what his brother was saying. His wife, Michelle, filed for divorce, saying that John abused her so badly she lost hearing in her ear. And that was in 1977. So this is 2 years after he's been missing. By 1980, his own mother had said she hadn't seen him in 3 years.
Wow.
Apparently, Brisker walked away from his bank account with nearly $29,000. So he was $40,000 in debt to his club, but he had $29,000 in his bank. He had a home in Redmond. He had 3 children and his entire life, and he just walked away. No one knows really exactly when he walked away, because nobody could be like, oh, this was like really the last time. He talked to his girlfriend in like 1978, and like then she lost contact with him. It's all very much mysterious. He was declared dead in absentee on May 29th, 1985 by the medical examiner of King County for the purpose of settling his estate.
I was gonna say, how do you do that?
So once someone's been missing, I think it's been 7 years where they're like, it's been 7 years that we can prove we have not heard from this person. You can have them declared dead.
So he could be alive.
Right. Basically, they had no proof that he was alive or dead, and technically they're declaring him dead, but the state flat out said they don't really know. Like the state was like, I don't know.
So
He might be
what
dead.
happens to his social security number? Like if he's considered dead, like if
He has a death
decided to come
certificate.
back.
It's like if anyone dies, like if he came
Right.
back, it would be like I'm sure there'd be bureaucracy and red tape and stuff. But it's been 40
cool.
years.
It's been how long?
40 years. Over 40 years, and nobody's
Yeah, he's
seen him.
probably not here anyways anymore. But
Yeah.
it would have been interesting if he would have stepped back in and been like, "Yo,
Hey, what's up? I'm here."
I'm here.
So, basically, they had no proof he was alive, and technically, they're declaring him dead. Like that's what they said. For years, rumors made the rounds. Brisker was on the run from the feds, although there was literally no sources or proof for that. But his, relationship with Ammon was like whatever, was like fuel for fodder that like he had committed maybe some atrocities. Because they thought he could do that. Maybe he was on the run from the mob because he had his clubs and he was, there was tax problems there and all of that stuff. So there was rumors that he was in like witness protection from the mafia. But again, zero proof. This is just speculation.
No.
Brisker went to work as a soldier of fortune, a mercenary. His angry disposition and love of guns really fueled this one. People were like, oh yeah, he's over in Africa and he's a mercenary and he's doing all this. Like, he's not exactly hard to spot. Like, he is a big man. I don't know how like stealthy.
I don't know how he'd blend in, but whatever.
He was always more of a bull in the china shop, just like going through and like punching people in the face rather than being real sneaky about it. Brisker fell in with some shady librarian grifters. That was another one that was really popular for a while. That he
librarian
was like,
drifters?
Librarian grifters. I couldn't find literally anything on this other than somebody said it in some forum. So
I was just like, man, them books must be good.
Yes. And then obviously the one where he fell in with Ammon.
Yeah.
That he was boxing with the bloodthirsty tyrant and coaching his Ugandan national basketball team. That was like a big one for a while. Brisker got on the wrong side of Ammon and wound up in a pile of 1,000 corpses. Ammon was overthrown by rebel forces in 1979, and it has been speculated that Brisker was executed by a firing squad at that time, because when he was overthrown, they just killed everybody. But no one knows for sure. And somebody even reached out to Ammon's like kid and was like, hey, do you know anything about this John Brisker guy? And the kid was like, I don't remember him. And I was also like a child when all of this was happening. So I don't know.
Wow.
But really, no one knows for sure. Some people think maybe he lived under an assumed identity in Africa. Brisker maybe made it back to the States and he was again an assumed identity. Maybe he's just dead. Maybe he died in some other way that nobody knows.
Maybe he's just dead.
And then the last one is that Brisker's alive still. And he's like, one of his friends like says that every time he watches the Shawshank movie, he always thinks he's like, oh, that's Brisker somewhere on a beach, just being like, hey, bitches, I'm still here.
It's so true, because it's like you don't know. And there are so many, and especially down in Africa, like not, it could happen anywhere, but
there's a lot of places where you could hide. Yeah.
Completely.
Somewhere where
it's
people
like,
don't know you.
You could get lost here in the US. I mean, to go somewhere where nobody has contact for you.
Yeah, there was a guy who murdered his girlfriend's family in the town that I grew up in. And he went to Colorado and he lived there for like 10 years under an assumed name. And he just blended right in. Nobody knew. Nobody had any idea. So it could happen. For sure. And like another country.
Yeah.
Why not? So There is a little silver lining to this story. John Brisker, one of John Brisker's 3 children, said that she believes her father's gone. Like, she thinks that when his mom passed away that he would have come back. He wouldn't have, like,
Nope,
not come
I
back
agree.
for that. But even though he's gone, his athleticism and competitive spirit live on in his grandchildren.
Mm,
A single mother, Majani Brisker raised 6 children in Pittsburgh while she worked. Tale Lamar Brisker, her 3rd oldest child and 2nd oldest son, took it upon himself to be a father figure to the other children. He was
the
like a
one.
really good big brother, and he stepped up to the plate. Tragically, he was killed in a shooting in Texas. This was like yet another tragedy to strike the Brisker family. And this family's been through a lot. Like with, his mom having the stroke, the dad leaving, him disappearing.
Mom dying.
Yeah. And now the son getting murdered.
Wow.
I know, very tragic.
Yeah.
However, this was Tale's younger siblings carried their brother with them, though. Adia Brisker is a talented basketball player and a senior at Queen's University in Charlotte. She is a civil engineering student with aspirations to play in the WNBA.
That's awesome.
Brisker's grandson, Jaquan, was drafted by the Bears in the 2nd round of the 2020 NFL draft. He was number 48 overall.
Wow.
He started as a rookie in all 15 games that he was active for in 2022. He compiled 103 tackles and a team high 4 sacks.
That's
his
so crazy.
Rookie year. He's
awesome.
He's so good. His 73 solo tackles were third most among all NFL rookies during the regular season. 3rd. Safe to say, wherever John Brisker is, his legacy is being carried on by his family.
For sure. And I hope it keeps going. I mean, that's amazing. It's depressing to hear. Obviously, closure is a big thing for a lot of people. And I just have such a hard time believing that he would up and leave his family, especially his mom, to have his dad
3
leave.
kids.
I mean, just like, it just doesn't make sense. Like, maybe he went there for one intention, maybe to look at houses or something, like he quote unquote said, and he was supposed to come back and something happened. I mean, who knows? We'll never really know. I think we should really become friends with a medium. I think we need more answers.
I feel bummed out, like he was so when I read about how he beat up his wife and like all that was not cool. I'm like, ugh. He had a lot of anger. I don't think he ever dealt with, and it was, it was the 60s. People didn't like get therapy.
Well, it sounds like his kids don't have anger issues, which is really good.
His granddaughter, Adia, she puts a T-shirt out over a chair for her brother who was killed at every game because he's her angel, she says. So I thought that was really sweet. And their mom said that like their athleticism and like all that they're doing got her through what happened with their son, their brother.
Oh yeah, something has to. I mean, she lost Brisker.
Yeah, she lost her dad and her son.
Just lost everything. Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot to take in.
Yeah. So that is the unsolved and tragic and roller coaster disappearance of John Brisker. We appreciate you guys for joining us. If you know where John is, go ahead and let us know. Yeah, we want to know. So if you know where he is,
if you're a medium and you can tell us, like,
yes, we're curious.
DM. Like, seriously,
slide into the DMs. Let us know. Otherwise, hope you guys stay safe, make good choices, and have a great rest of your day.
See you guys.
Bye.
Me gusta mi booty, me gusta mi booty, me con un selfie con filtro Hello Kitty.